bus boycott and the March on Washington and the Selma to Montgomery marches brought national attention to the injustice. Finally, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 ended legal segregation and protected voting rights. The legacy of Jim Crow. While Jim Crow laws are no longer in effect, their legacy persists in systematic racism, economic inequality, and ongoing struggles for racial justice in the U.S. Understanding this history is crucial to addressing the challenges that remain today. Thanks again for watching, and please go do some research about Jim Crow laws. It's a very important subject, and many schools across.
Yeah, and I'm glad he was able to give us that synopsis of Jim Crow laws, right? Because I don't think people really think about the harms that it, just the psychological harms that it did outside of the physical harms, because it led to violence, and the violence was allowed. Now, we haven't even gotten to redlining and the black codes and the sundown towns. You know what I'm saying? It's sad. It's like, look, can I go on? In a country, again, where the First Amendment says all men are created equal, and those laws were not enforced nor upheld for a specific segment of the country. Black Americans specifically that were in this country were denied equal rights. And they did the whole separate but equal thing. And that's where you get whites only, blacks only. It's disgusting. It was a disgrace on this country. And it wasn't that long ago. That's the crazy part. My mother was born in 1950. She was born during this time of this stuff going on. So no, you don't get to just brush up people off like me and say, oh, well, that happened in the past. The past is still here, still present. It's the issue, because we haven't really had that nasty, real conversation about this. But we will, because we have to, because it's important. Okay. Now from there, I want to pull this video up because I was going to save it to the end, but I think it's a little bit more prevalent for me to play it now. So let me just share this one. Like, is it playing? It's like, okay. I'm sorry. There we go.
Was ActBlue nothing more than a slick, shadowy money laundering racket, siphoning USAID cash straight into the greedy hands of Democrat elites? The second that USAID spigot got shut off, those so-called small dollar donations vanished into thin air. Coincidence? I think not.
We had a lot of problems with ActBlue, and most all of that was all refunded.
You've never had a day where you maybe donated 53 times?
No.
Okay.
No, not anything even remotely close to that.
They think you won't notice it. Yeah, but she didn't donate to them. They just get the information from your credit card and pass it to the next person.
And now the top 7 executives at ActBlue are bolting like rats off a sinking ship. What do they know? What dirty secrets are they running from? The Democrats, drenched in the sweat of their own interior panic, have responded by yanking the race card from their tattered deck once again, flinging it like a cheap smokescreen to shroud their laundry list of crimes, corruption, election meddling, and a trail of broken promises.
This is not America. This is a terrible nightmare. Somebody slap me and wake me the f*** up. Those immigrants that come into our country, they work the fields, something that we ain't done in a long time. And clearly, he is trying to make us go back to the fields.
It's a recipe to make education unavailable to Black people. And where does that then leave us? It puts us back to when America was great and we were picking cotton and...
What? The fact that they want to continue to be this intellectually dishonest and sit here and fearmonger you to a point to say this man is literally trying to bring us back to slavery, knowing that the people who don't care about politics whatsoever is going to hold on to that. And then it's going to equate to them building up this triggering tension to the point that, yes, you have people making videos about trying to assassinate this man. And then you don't want to take no accountability for that because, I didn't tell him to go assassinate. But you're over here inducing and inciting.
Democrats assume that if they scream racism loud enough, the sheeple will snap to attention, too distracted by the finger pointing to notice the backroom deals and the slow bleed of liberty.
We're going back to a 1950s America. As a new member of Congress, I was shocked at what seemed like a blatant disrespect for the House, and it wasn't coming from Representative Green. It was coming from the men behind him on the right side who were telling him and yelling, "Sit down." I mean, it felt like I was watching something in a history class of racists yelling at an elderly black man challenging the president of the United States not to cut medical care for the sick.
I've been in places where I didn't want to be, and I know what it sounds like. I've been called all kinds of ugly names. So I know invidious discrimination. And when the speaker decided that I would be removed, and then there was this motion, this resolution to censure me, it became obvious to me that I was not being treated as others were. Mm-hmm. And candidly speaking, it is invidious discrimination, harmful discrimination.
It's an attack on this government that used to be headed by a black man. It's an attack on this government that almost elected a black woman to the highest office in the land.
It's a desperate, flailing act from a party that's lost the plot.
Why are the 20 million people who are definitely dead marked as alive in the Social Security database? Why were hundreds of millions of dollars of Small Business Administration loans were given out to people aged 11 and under?
Terrified that the awakening masses might finally peek behind the curtain and see the rot they've been papering over with identity politics.
You've got congressmen on both sides of the aisle that if they follow that paper trail, it's going to come back to them. You got their wife and or girlfriend that works for some agency, quasi-agency or some business, and I'll probably get primary for saying that, but that's the truth, and we all know it.
Fear's a hell of a motivator, and they're running on fumes, banking on division to keep the guillotine at bay. The spotlight's blazing, and the people aren't buying the race-baiting hustle anymore. John Bound reporting for InfoWars.
Yeah. Because when you lose the argument, all you have is race. I'm just saying. There's just some things I wish I was wrong, but I'm not. But I also wanted you guys to check this out with me. Voter fraud in America. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a shock to you. It was to me.
November 3rd, millions of Americans will be asked to cast their vote in what many call one of the most divisive elections in our nation's history. For many voters, one of the biggest questions is how do they know their vote is safe and that others' votes are legitimate? To answer that question, let's take a quick look at the history of voter fraud. In 1789, George Washington won America's very first presidential election, and until 1804, the electors would vote for the top two candidates. The one with the most votes would become the president, and the one with the second most would become vice president. During the 1800s, fraud was almost intertwined with U.S. elections. One common form of voter fraud at the time was cooping. Cooping was a violent form of voter fraud in which gangs would kidnap a victim and force them to vote multiple times in a variety of disguises, sometimes by giving them drugs or alcohol. Some believe cooping could have been the inadvertent cause in the death of Edgar Allan Poe. At the time of his death, voter fraud was extremely common in Baltimore, and on top of that, Poe was literally found on the street outside of a polling location on Election Day. By the end of the 19th century, corruption in the election process was being more heavily scrutinized, which led to new voting laws and election formats. However, cooping-like cases would continue into the 1920s, with violent gang activity like Al Capone's voting line raids in Chicago. For most of U.S. history, it was basically impossible to keep your vote secret. Until the 1890s, all elections were held by either ticket or by voice. Literally, you had to show or say what your vote was in public for it to be counted. And while this seems like it would prevent voter fraud, having to put your politics on display for your friends and coworkers could be problematic. This resulted in the largest change to ensure the security and sanctity of U.S. elections from fraud with the enactment of the secret ballot we know today, which required a complete overhaul of how U.S. elections were run at the time. For a very long time, polling locations were often set up in saloons or in private homes, and there were no mandated ways to keep elected officials or electioneers, people supporting the candidates, away from influencing voters at the polling location. At polling locations, anyone could force or be forced by any means to sway a vote. In the mid-1800s, as many as 89 people died just trying to get to the polls after being violently coerced. The secret ballot is also sometimes referred to as the Australian ballot, as it was a form of voting that came from Australia via Britain. It established that elections would be held in indoor spaces, in public buildings, and run by government officials. Rather than party tickets, there would be a single ballot that was produced by the state. The new ballot would contain the names of the candidates with an option to also write in. The ballot would be filled out in complete privacy, but even with secret ballots, fraudsters have tried to find way after way to ensure that their candidate ended up the winner, and many ways have been tried. The Heritage Foundation, which has done some of the most comprehensive work on issues of voter fraud, defines various forms: impersonation fraud at the polls, false registrations, duplicate voting, fraudulent use of absentee ballots, buying votes, illegal assistance at the polls, ineligible voting, altering the vote count, and ballot petition fraud. The same group, whose research dates back to the 1980s, found 1,071 proven instances of voter fraud. Additionally, a 2017 study by the Brennan Center for Justice found that the rate of voting fraud overall in the U.S. is between 0.00004% and 0.0009%. But in 2020, with the coronavirus pandemic making leaving home for some a literal matter of life and death, many this year will choose to vote by mail. President Donald Trump has perpetuated a myriad of false claims surrounding the safety and legitimacy of mail-in voting. He has used language attempting to discourage voting by mail, labeling it as dangerous, unconstitutional, a scam, or rife with fraud. Many studies and reviews have proven that his comments are not true and that voter fraud is extremely rare in all forms, including mail-in voting. Such reports and studies include a national study from 2016, which found that there are few credible allegations of fraudulent voting, and a panel that Trump charged with investigating election corruption found no real evidence of fraud. According to the Washington Post, just one case of postal voting fraud was found in a review of the 2016 election. A voter fraud database created by Arizona State University found 491 cases of postal ballot fraud out of hundreds of millions of votes between 2000 and 2012. In addition, there are also safeguards in place to prevent people from stealing ballots and impersonating voters. These include authorities checking that ballots have come from voters' registered addresses and requiring signatures on envelopes. Despite Trump's claims that mail-in ballot signatures don't have to be verified, most states do compare signatures on the ballot with signatures on file, and all have steps in place to verify mail-in votes. Additionally, if you're voting by mail, 39 states and DC allow you to track your ballot and verify its receipt. And while some people will feel that their vote won't make a difference regardless, in the last 20 years, there have been many instances in which elections were decided by only a handful of votes. For example, in 1991, a Virginia state House seat was decided by just one vote. The same thing happened in Connecticut in 2002. And in 2000, Al Gore lost the presidential election after Bush won Florida by a margin of 537 votes. So in almost all cases, voting in person or voting by mail, an American following the properly laid out election processes can rest assured that their vote will be counted. The electoral system is not perfect by any means, but learning from history and correcting past failures have ensured safer elections year after year. And who knows, your vote could be the one that makes all the difference.
Yeah. Now, I know a lot of people are like, okay, so we should have a better voting system. Yeah, We should. And, you know, there's not a real high case of illegitimacy voters. Now, that video was obviously done for during 2020, right? Or right before 2024 election.